Once upon a time, an extraordinary event occurred, a dream transformed into reality. My sister-in-law, Lily, and I found ourselves at the center of an amazing gift. A hopping sum of around $300 million and the stewardship of our very own company. The elation and astonishment we felt were beyond words as we celebrated the news of our windfall. It reached the ears of our colleagues. Lily, reveling in the moment, drew attention with her exuberance. Whispers circulated among the staff, attributing our newfound fortune to the benevolence of our father. Lily, in her pride, asserted her preference for subtlety, declaring, "I don't make noise." The plot thickened when my husband was granted ownership of the company and a substantial sum of $3 million. The revelation elicited laughter from one of the workers, leaving my older brother and his perplexed wife, OSS. While my brother, engrossed in a lawyer-provided document, appeared pallid and fearful, his wife's reaction to the contents of the paper was a scream. I am Anna, 29 years old, entrenched in my father's business since my youth, witnessing him build a company from scratch. I understood the struggles even during its modest beginnings. Despite my parents' aspirations for me to attend college and carve my own path, my heart was set on contributing to my father's company. Reflecting on this choice, post-high school, Max, a seasoned employee, imparted valuable lessons, treating me as an equal rather than the boss's daughter. His mentorship equipped me with essential business knowledge. My brother, Thomas, 2 years my senior, pursued a college education geared towards business management, harboring aspirations to inherit the company and be its future leader. Thomas's friends admired his future role, anticipating an easy life as the next boss. Questions arose about potential conflicts with his younger sister. Thomas assured them of my disinterest in the finer things, depicting me as quietly working behind the scenes, married to Lily, who reveled in extravagance. Thomas indulged her desires, fostering the belief that such a lifestyle would elevate his chances of becoming the boss. However, Lily, upon encountering me at family gatherings, would mockingly remark on my lack of resemblance to the typical boss's daughter, expressing my contentment with a simpler life. I asserted that material luxuries did not define my happiness. Lily, unable to comprehend my perspective, chided me for seemingly lacking the ability to wisely manage wealth. My brother chimed in, echoing her sentiments, acknowledging my ongoing learning curve in the company. I admitted to not having all the answers. My brother, however, criticized my lack of confidence, emphasizing the importance of projecting authority to gain respect. Undeterred, I acknowledged that within our family, only my father and I held authoritative roles in the company. Despite the criticism from my brother and Lily, my mother offered reassurance, acknowledging the positive impact of my contributions to the company. My father concurred, but my brother and Lily remained unmoved by our perspectives. They distanced themselves from us for over a month, clearly upset by our differences. Reflecting on that challenging period, I suggested to my parents, Thomas and Lily can say whatever they want. Despite this, my brother and Lily continued their extravagant lifestyle, dining at upscale restaurants and embarking on lavish vacations. They aimed to maintain the facade that my brother was the future president of the company. During this time, my father devoted himself to expanding the business. However, one evening, he began complaining about chest pain. Concerned, I urged him to relax and promised to call an ambulance. In the midst of his distress, he pointed to a drawer, whispering, "There's a letter for you in there. If anything happens to me, read it. The rest is for the lawyers." Unfortunately, he lost consciousness before the ambulance arrived and never woke up again, eventually passing away. My brother and Lily, away on vacation, returned a couple of days later, acting as though their delay was inconsequential. At the funeral, my brother casually mentioned, "We're relieved we got back in time." Who would have thought that Dad would pass away while we were on vacation? His nonchalant attitude left me taken aback, as if he didn't grasp that my mother and I were left to handle everything on our own. Seeking a private moment to address my brother, I asked, "Did you have a chance to come home earlier?" He replied, "I couldn't because I had already booked our flight back," showing no remorse. Later, Addressing the employees, my brother proudly asserted, "Thank you all for your help. From now on, trust me to take over my father's place in a good way." Lily chimed in, praising his dignity and expecting admiration. Annoyed by my brother's late arrival and arrogant demeanor, I guided them to the ceremony's meal table. Throughout the meal, my brother continued his proud act, questioning the food's quality. Attempting to calm him down, I reminded him that my mother and I had already discussed and approved the menu. I asserted my independence, stating, "I don't want you telling me what to do. This is why people don't really understand what it means to be a president." His arrogance extended to ordering around the employees, including Max, a longtime staff member. I intervened, cautioning him against being rude and reminding him to show humility. "Thomas, don't be so bold. They're not just mere employees. You should show some humility," I urged, attempting to reason with him. "These guys should respect me more. I'm the president," my brother replied with a lot of arrogance. Lily joined in, saying, "That's right, Anna. Stop talking back to Thomas, the president of the company. If you don't listen, he can fire you. He has the power." As my brother and Lily were making a scene, a man appeared and said, "I'm sorry to interrupt. Your father asked me to take care of his inheritance." He was the lawyer my father had hired while he was still alive. I recalled my father mentioning a lawyer, and it turned out he had thought about what would happen after he was gone. My brother and Lily got excited when the lawyer mentioned inheritance. They welcomed him into the room with smiles, eager to get things done. Quickly, however, as the lawyer was talking, my brother started crying, saying, "Wasn't my father's inheritance worth $300 million? Lily was thrilled to hear this and exclaimed, $300 million. That's so much money. Having a company with that much money is like a dream." When the employees heard this, they started whispering to each other. Lily proudly announced, "Everybody be quiet. This is the moment when the company and the $300 million pass to Thomas." Hearing this, one employee couldn't stop laughing. My brother had gotten hold of the will and was reading it beside Lily, who seemed puzzled about what was happening. As he read, my brother's face turned pale. According to the will, the entire company was supposed to go to the oldest daughter, Anna. He stared at the paper, shocked for a while, then started shouting, "This can't be true. This is wrong." In a serious tone, the lawyer said, "This is a will that's legally valid." My brother's voice became tighter and more strained, saying, "I don't care about this. How can Anna be the president instead of me?" Maybe Dad was just getting old and confused. The lawyer continued, "Yes, your father's judgment might not have been clear. A will made by someone who is not thinking straight might not hold up." Hearing this, I couldn't bear it any longer. I couldn't let these two people insult my dad, who was a good person. I couldn't let even family members bring down his reputation. The idea of my brother becoming the president seemed completely unthinkable to me. My words seemed to anger my brother even more. "What are you saying? Are you trying to say I'm not good enough to be the president?" I replied without hesitation, "You're right. How can you lead the company if you've never really helped it?" "Don't be ridiculous," my brother protested. "Lily and I even built a huge house that's fit for a president. We went to great lengths to make me look the part," I retorted, "by building a mansion that's not suitable for someone in your position, or by spending too much money on fancy restaurants. That's not good for the company's image. Money is important, but it's not the only thing. Besides, didn't Dad cover most of the costs for the house and any extravagant lifestyle?" My brother challenged, "How would you know all that?" I explained, "Just before he passed away, Dad left me a letter. In that letter, he outlined all the money he had spent on you and mentioned that it would be considered your gift during his lifetime. So your share of the inheritance is practically nothing." Lily was alarmed when she heard this. "Hold on a second. Is this supposed $300 million inheritance already spent? That doesn't seem fair if we got so little from it." An employee who had previously laughed suddenly stepped in and told Lily that the $300 million came from the company's funds, not from personal assets. "I believe all of us employees here are well aware of that," the employee added. "Can money from the company even be inherited?" Lily wondered aloud. I informed her, "No, it can't. The money from the company isn't meant for the family to inherit, so I'm pretty sure that your share, Lily, would be minimal. Lily was saddened by this revelation. That's really disheartening. I was shocked by the inheritance amount too. Oh no. $300 million suddenly, my brother stood up as if he had a sudden realization and shouted at the employees, "Do you really want your company president to be someone as plain as Anna? You should believe that I'm more qualified. I have the same kind of charisma that my father had." However, none of his colleagues agreed with him. Max stepped forward and began talking to my brother. "Your father was a charismatic man who started the company, but you and he aren't the same person. What you're showing is arrogance, not charisma." My brother grew angry as the employee calmly refuted him. "Thomas, you might be part of the company, but we rarely see you actually working," Max pointed out, growing frustrated. My brother argued, "That's because I don't have time to do any of the regular work. I'm busy networking with others. I don't have time for tasks anyone can do." Max continued, "Networking isn't everything. Anna works diligently every day to understand the company better. She quietly handles her responsibilities behind the scenes." Max's words seemed to resonate with everyone present. "I feel the same sincerity in Anna as I saw in your father. Anna is the right person for the job," he concluded. Everyone at the company nodded in agreement, touched by their support. I said, "Thank you so much. Honestly, I'm surprised by the sudden news, but having seen my father's dedication to the company, I care about it just as deeply as all of you do. I look forward to your continued help." The employees clapped warmly, and I bowed to them deeply, encouraged by the applause. I spoke firmly, "All of you here are important friends who have contributed to our business. Anyone who ignores your efforts is not fit to be an employee, let alone the company's president. Yes, even the president can be fired." My brother grew annoyed hearing this. "What are you even saying?" "I'm your brother," I responded. "I mean exactly what I said." "You even mentioned that if you became president, you might fire me," he exclaimed. How can you say this? I'm family." I remained steadfast. I can't keep an inefficient employee on the payroll just because he's related. This is completely absurd. He looked around, his face full of desperation, and pleaded for support from those present, but the employees simply stared back with cold expressions. Realizing he had no allies, my brother and Lily left the scene. After that, Thomas lost his job and relied on the small inheritance he had received. However, the funds dwindled quickly, and he turned to me, asking for a loan. Disappointed by my brother's lack of effort even after being fired, I firmly told my mother not to give him any money. His friends, who had once supported him, abandoned him when they found out he lost the presidency to his sister. Lily, who had expected to be the company president's wife, found herself in a tough spot. Eventually, they decided to sell their mansion. The money from the sale allowed them to sustain their lifestyle for a while. However, with no income, their savings diminished rapidly. They reached a point where they had nothing left to sell and couldn't afford their living expenses. When they tried to find work, no one would hire them due to their lack of experience. Thomas managed to get a part-time job at a convenience store, a role he was unfamiliar with. He faced criticism from younger part-time employees. Lily's situation changed as well. She couldn't continue as a full-time housewife. She joined a group of part-time housewives and worked as a cashier at a supermarket from morning to night, earning a modest monthly salary. On the flip side, I applied what I learned from my behind-the-scenes work to help the company. Max and the other employees collaborated with me, leading the company to steady growth. My brother's situation unintentionally strengthened the unity among the employees. I made a promise to keep working with my mother to expand the business. Our goal was to bring more happiness to my Father in heaven.
Hello, everyone. My name is Flora. I am married to Daniel Bryan. Felt like stepping into another universe. His family, the Bryans, were the epitome of high society. Wealthy, influential, and, to an outsider, intimidating. Their estate was a sprawling masterpiece, with every inch meticulously manicured and every room a testament to their wealth. Walking through those halls, I felt like a character in a movie. It was breathtaking and, admittedly, a bit overwhelming. In the beginning, I was naively optimistic, believing that love was enough to bridge the gap. But the Bryans had their own rules, their own way of doing things. It was like an unspoken game, and I was the only one who didn't know the rules. Harry, Daniel's older brother, was the ringleader. He had this way of making you feel insignificant without raising his voice. "So, Flora, this must be a big change from where you grew up, huh?" he would say, his voice dripping with condescension, his eyes scanning me like I was an exhibit. I tried to laugh it off, replying, "Every day is an adventure, Harry. I'm just trying to keep up." Then there were the dinners, where every word felt like a test, and every silence was loaded with meaning. Mrs. Bryan, with her piercing gaze, always found a way to remind me of my humble origins. "It's so brave of you, Flora, to step into our world. Not everyone can adapt to such refinement," she'd say. But I was determined not to let them get to me. I wanted to prove that I was more than what they saw, more than just the girl from the other side of the tracks who had managed to snag the good son of a wealthy family. Then I found out I was pregnant. Suddenly, there was this flicker of hope. Maybe this baby would be the bridge between me and the Bryans, something that would soften them and make them see me as one of their own. When I told Daniel, his face lit up as if I had just handed him the world. "We're going to have a baby, Em. Can you believe it? You're going to be an amazing mom," he said. I clung to that optimism, thinking maybe, just maybe, this baby could change everything. But life has a way of not playing by your rules. Instead of bringing the family closer, the news of my pregnancy seemed to light the fuse of an already ticking bomb. The Bryans had always been about wealth and inheritance, and my baby represented a shift in a balance they weren't ready for. Harry's animosity became more apparent. It started subtly, a snide comment here, a backhanded compliment there. "A baby, huh? Dad's going to have to rethink his will now. Congratulations, Flora," he said once, his smile not reaching his eyes. The tension in the house grew thicker each day. I tried to keep my distance, but living under the same roof felt like being constantly watched by vultures waiting for a carcass. One day, it all came crashing down. Daniel was delayed at work, and I was alone with Mrs. Bryan and Harry. The air felt heavy, charged with unspoken anger and resentment. The confrontation started over something trivial. I think I had moved a vase to dust around it, but it escalated quickly. "You think you can just come in here and change everything?" Harry's voice was cold, his eyes flashing with anger. "I was just cleaning, Harry. I didn't mean to upset anyone," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Cleaning or snooping around? We know your game, Flora. You're nothing but a gold digger trying to secure your child's future at our expense." Mrs. Bryan chimed in, her voice dripping with disdain. I felt trapped, the walls of the opulent living room closing in on me. "That's not true. I love Daniel, and this baby, our baby, is a blessing," I managed to say, but my voice was trembling. Then it happened. In a moment of rage, Harry stepped forward and pushed me. I fell hard onto the ground. The pain was immediate, and I knew something was terribly wrong. I lay there, cradling my stomach as Harry and Mrs. Bryan stood over me. There was a moment of shock on their faces, but no remorse. "Look what you made me do," Harry muttered, more to himself than to me. When Daniel finally came home, he found me in a state of shock, bruises forming, tears streaming down my face. Between sobs and gasps of pain, I told him everything. Daniel's reaction was a mix of horror, anger, and disbelief. He helped me up, his arms around me, his eyes burning with fury. "We're leaving, Flora, tonight. I won't let them hurt you or our baby anymore." We packed in silence, the air thick with unspoken words. As we drove away from the Bryan estate, I felt a sense of relief mixed with deep, overwhelming sadness. But the worst was yet to come. At the hospital, the doctors confirmed our fears. We had lost the baby. The fall, the trauma, it was too much. Lying in that hospital bed, with Daniel by my side, everything felt surreal. The Bryans, their estate, their wealth, none of it mattered anymore. All I could think about was the baby we lost, the future we had dreamed of, gone in an instant. Leaving the Bryan estate was like stepping out of a storm into an uncertain calm. Daniel and I were broken, trying to piece together our lives after the loss. We moved into a small apartment, a stark contrast to the grandeur we had left behind, but it became our sanctuary. Those first few weeks were tough. Daniel threw himself into work, while I struggled to find my footing in a world that suddenly felt so different. We talked less, the silence between us filled with the unspoken grief of what we had lost. But amidst our sorrow, there was a glimmer of light. Daniel's father, Mr. Bryan, was the antithesis of the rest of his family. Where they were cold, he was warm. Where they were calculating, he was genuine. He visited often, always with a kind word and a listening ear. "Flora, my dear, I'm so sorry for what happened. Your family, and you always will be," he'd say, his eyes filled with a sincerity that was rare in his family. His visits were a balm to our aching hearts. He never pushed, never pried, just offered his support and love. It was Mr. Bryan who helped us see that life could still be beautiful, that we could rebuild from our loss. Then something miraculous happened. I discovered I was pregnant again. The joy was immediate, but so was the fear. The memory of our loss was still too fresh, too painful. However, with Daniel and Mr. Bryan's support, I allowed myself to feel a cautious hope. Daniel's face, when I told him about the pregnancy, was a mix of happiness and fear. "We're going to be extra careful this time. I'm not letting anything happen to you or our baby," he said. Mr. Bryan was overjoyed when he heard the news. "A new beginning," he said, his eyes shining with tears. "This child, Flora, is a blessing, a sign that life goes on no matter what." But fate had a cruel twist in store. Just when things seemed to be looking up, we received the news. Mr. Bryan had passed away unexpectedly. It was a shock that shook us to our core. He had been our rock, our safe harbor in the storm that was his family. The brief period of mourning that followed was overshadowed by the palpable greed of the Bryan family. It was like vultures circling, waiting to see what they could claim from Mr. Bryan's legacy. As we grieved the loss of a truly good man, it became clear that the battle for the Bryan inheritance was just beginning. But in that moment, all I could think about was the baby growing inside me, a symbol of hope in a time of darkness. After Mr. Bryan's passing, the atmosphere within the Bryan family shifted palpably. The solemnity of mourning was quickly overshadowed by a barely concealed eagerness for the inheritance. It was like watching actors in a poorly scripted play, their grief giving way to greed. Daniel and I attended the reading of the will with a sense of dread. The rest of the Bryan family was abuzz with anticipation, speculating about their shares of the estate. The lawyer cleared his throat, opening the will. You could have heard a pin drop. "Mr. Bryan has made some specific allocations in his will," he began, his voice formal and emotionless. As the lawyer read on, shock rippled through the room. Mr. Bryan had left a significant portion of his estate to me and our unborn child, ensuring our financial security and independence. Harry's face was a picture of disbelief and anger. "This can't be right. He's leaving money to her and her child." His voice was laced with venom. Mrs. Bryan was equally incredulous, her shock mirroring Harry's. "But that's our inheritance. How could he do this?" Harry's voice seethed with anger, his eyes blazing with disbelief. The lawyer, unfazed by the outburst, continued calmly. Mr. Bryan was very clear in his intentions. He wanted to ensure that Flora and her child are well taken care of. I sat there, stunned and humbled by Mr. Bryan's foresight and kindness. Daniel squeezed my hand, his expression a mix of sadness and gratitude. "Dad always knew what was right," he whispered. The rest of the reading passed in a blur, with Harry and Mrs. Bryan exchanging whispered arguments and shooting angry glares our way. But something had shifted within me. I felt a newfound strength, a resolve to stand up against their greed and malice. After the reading, the backlash was immediate. "You manipulated my father," Harry accused, his face flushed with rage. "I did no such thing," I replied, my voice steady. "Your father was a kind man who saw what was happening in his own house." Mrs. Bryan tried to interject, but Daniel stepped in. "Enough. Dad made his choice, and we will respect it. Flora and our child deserve this." As we left the lawyer's office, the weight of the Bryan family's animosity bore down on us. But there was also a sense of liberation. We were no longer bound to them, no longer tethered to their toxic world. That day marked a turning point for me. I was no longer the outsider trying to fit in. I was a mother-to-be, a woman with a newfound purpose, ready to protect my family against whatever the Bryans might throw our way. The birth of my son was the beginning of a new chapter in my life. After so much pain and loss, holding him in my arms felt like a piece of heaven had been handed to me. His tiny fingers, his soft cries, they were symbols of hope, of a future finally looking bright. Daniel was an incredible father, his love and support unwavering. We named our son Leo, a name that meant strong and enduring. It suited him, and it suited us, a family that had weathered the storm and emerged stronger. Meanwhile, the Bryan family's world began to crumble. The inheritance, or the lack thereof, hit them hard. Harry, consumed by greed and anger, found himself embroiled in legal troubles. His shady business dealings, once overlooked due to his father's influence, were now in the spotlight. He faced lawsuits and financial ruin, his fall from grace a stark contrast to his former arrogance. Mrs. Bryan's life took a downward spiral as well. Without the financial cushion she was accustomed to, her lavish lifestyle became unsustainable. The friends she once hosted with such grandeur began to distance themselves, leaving her in a lonely, self-made exile. As for Daniel and me, we built a life filled with love and laughter, far from the toxic environment of the Bryan estate. I started a small business, something I had always dreamed of but never had the courage to pursue. To my joy and surprise, it flourished. Daniel found success in his career too, his integrity and hard work paying off. We were a team in every sense of the word, building a life on our terms, away from the shadows of the Bryan legacy. One evening, as I watched Leo play, Daniel came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "We did it, Em. We made it through," he said softly. I leaned back into his embrace, a smile in my voice. "We did," I replied, "and we have so much to be thankful for." Looking back, the journey was anything but easy. There were moments of despair, of heartache. But there were also moments of incredible strength, of love that refused to be diminished. In the end, justice was served, not just in the downfall of the Bryans, but in the life we built out of the ashes of that ordeal. We found joy, not in their misery, but in our own triumph, in our ability to rise above and create something beautiful out of something so broken. The story has reached its conclusion, and I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. But before you go, I have a question for you. In a world filled with challenges and difficult decisions, what do you believe is the true measure of victory? Is it revenge or the ability to find peace and build a better life? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's have a thoughtful discussion.
"Chris, why are you home?" inquired Angela, my spouse for 28 years, as she entered through the garage and saw me at our kitchen table less than 10 feet away. Her body partially blocked a tall, younger man following her into our home. Angela, consistently beautiful, stands at a striking 5 feet 9 inches, weighing a healthy 145 pounds, with auburn hair falling over her shoulders. She always dresses professionally for work, and today, in a white blouse, an extra button undone, revealed enticing cleavage between her spectacular 38D cup chest. A black linen skirt highlighted her world-class legs, and 3-inch heels perfectly shaped the cheeks of her backside. Briefly contemplating Angela's seemingly foolish question, I responded by stating that I lived there. A quick flash of irritation, which had been increasingly prevalent over the past weeks, surfaced as she inquired about the reason for my presence at home at 3:30 in the afternoon. I often jest with anyone who will listen that I loved Angela since we first met. Meeting her as the administrative assistant for 4 top executives in her company, she escorted me to the senior suite for hours of meetings. Taking a chance, I asked her to dinner as she walked me back to the lobby, and the rest is history. By now, Angie's companion had maneuvered around her and stood at her side. Anticipating a smirk, I was surprised to see concern in his intelligent eyes. Clearly, things weren't going as planned. I couldn't help but question Angie about the reason for her early arrival home, an hour and a half earlier than expected. Angela and I have been inseparable since our first date. I dedicated all my energy to her and our family, establishing a successful insurance brokerage firm. With the assistance of her employer, Angela achieved a bachelor's degree in 6 years, progressing from a support role to leading HR in the company's Hartford, Connecticut office. Having loved Angela unconditionally for nearly 3 decades, I faced the transformation she had undergone with determined calmness. Desiring to break her as effectively as she broke me, I gave Angie my signature crooked grin, prompting her response, "We came home early to talk with you." I questioned Angie about the collective reference to "we" locking eyes with her. Taking advantage of the moment to introduce himself, her companion confidently stated that he was Michael Browner, the new attorney at Kellerman & Sons, closely collaborating with Ong for the past couple of months. Despite his extended hand, which I ignored, and while maintaining eye contact with Angie, I refrained from reacting violently, opting to growl and assert that I knew exactly who and what he was. For the first time, I noticed signs of concern in my wife, and she cringed when I mentioned Ong. "You once threatened severe consequences for anyone who called you Ong. Why tolerate such disrespect in your own home from this individual I'm referring to as Mofo?" I pointed in his direction. Angie, habitually worried and confused, is a meticulous planner. I was certain she and Mofo had meticulously planned for every possible scenario for this conversation, with every I dotted and every T crossed. In her perception, I was already a compliant, betrayed man. A quick glance at Mofo brought a smile to my face. I was fairly certain his sphincter muscle was tightening, soon to be clenched as tightly as mine. A tumultuous situation was brewing, unlike anything Angie and her companion could envision. Taking 2 or 3 deep, cleansing breaths, I endeavored to push aside the growing rage and disgust into a quiet corner of my heart. Internally, I resolved to proceed, thinking it was time to disrupt their plans once more. I suggested the idea of making 3 drinks and proposed discussing matters in the living room. Angie requested a subdued glass of wine. When turning to the other person, he appeared wary. Responding to my offer, he mentioned Angela's information about my liking for bourbon and craft beer. Nodding, I confirmed as I rose from the kitchen table and headed to the family room's bar. Exiting the room, I heard immediate, urgent whispering as they moved through the kitchen to the living room. A few minutes later, I joined them. They sat together on the sofa. Handing Angie her favorite Merlot and Mofo a tulip glass of ambrale, I settled into an armchair across from them. After raising my glass in salute, I took a sip of the fiery liquid. Returning the toast, Mofo sipped his beer, studying the color and carbonation. He made a remark about the complexity of the amber ale, asking about its identity. I responded that it was Pabst Blue Ribbon. At the mention of the beer, Mofo's eyes flared with anger, and Angie, appearing confused, mentioned my previous claim that Pabst Blue Ribbon was worse than donkey urine and considered the worst beer ever made. She was midway through her comment when she saw me laughing. She expressed her frustration, stating that I was being rude and condescending during what was supposed to be a calm conversation. I responded with a smile, questioning her accusation and suggesting that we needed to kickstart our conversation properly. I anticipated learning about having a polite, uplifting, and loving discussion from my wife. Angie cringed and avoided eye contact. S. White took over, beginning to discuss matters. I interrupted, directing my attention to him and pointing out his initial use of Mr. Harrington before presumptuously switching to calling me Chris. I insisted on being addressed as Mr. Harrington. As his face began to redden, I concluded with a shrug and suggested the alternative of addressing me as Sir. Instead of allowing S. White to continue, I turned to Angie and asked with heat, inquiring about the topic she wanted to discuss. When S. White seemed prepared to respond, I interjected, informing him that I was addressing my wife and instructing him to sit there, drink his complex amber ale, and remain quiet. Angie, in a state of fury, expressed her discontent with my behavior that afternoon, insisting that it needed to stop. I nodded, giving the appearance of contemplating her request, and posed a question about whether my behavior was better or worse than hers over the last 5 or 6 weeks. Angie, partially confused and worried, asked for clarification. Mofo seemed to hold his breath, perhaps thinking their carefully crafted plan had derailed. Locking eyes with Angie, I revealed that I was disturbed, expressing my uncertainty about what upset me more, her involvement with someone else, or her treating me like an imbecile. Angela's expression showed her astonishment. Her eyes narrowed, and she, in a hushed voice, mentioned having more friends at my office than I did. She received an anonymous email 2 weeks ago, warning about my alleged affair. The email included 3 attachments depicting me on a picnic lunch at Middlewoods Park, engaging in hand-holding and kissing. Apologizing for the way she found out, Angela was in the process of figuring out how to continue when I interjected, asking if she wanted a divorce. She responded negatively, moving to the edge of the couch, leaning forward, resting her elbows on her knees, and passionately expressing her love for me. Angela clarified that her involvement with Michael was a short-term fling, explaining that he was new to Connecticut and hadn't made many friends. She anticipated him finding a regular girlfriend once he was settled. Apologetic, she acknowledged that the situation didn't work for her, as she had signed up for a monogamous relationship with a loving wife. She concluded by stating that she was sorry, but a divorce would better align with her future plans. Angela pleaded with me to stop, expressing her disinterest in a divorce and suggesting that I probably felt the same. She characterized her involvement with Michael as a one-time fling, emphasizing that it was nothing more and that it stemmed from her attraction to him and a desire for extra excitement in her life. She assured me that it had never happened before and would soon be over, promising that it would never occur again. After taking a small sip of my bourbon, I remained silent for a few moments before responding. I pointed out that her promises held no meaning and asserted that everyone in the room knew she was a liar. Anticipating Angela's reaction, I continued, questioning why I should believe this was her first affair and suggesting that it could be her 51st. I urged her to think about our shared efforts in building a family and mentioned that, with Kelly married and contemplating starting her own family, we could now slow down and plan for a wonderful retirement. I expressed the belief that in a few years my fling with Michael would be long over and forgotten. I rose from my seat and, without inquiring if anyone desired another drink, walked to the din and replenished my glass. I was certain my lack of courtesy did not go unnoticed by the 2 individuals in the living room. Upon my return, I observed them huddled together and engaged in a whispered conversation. Mofo sought permission to speak, asking if he could express a few things. In response, I allowed him the floor with a disgusted reply. After gathering his thoughts, he conveyed that Angela was correct in characterizing their relationship as a short-term fling. He expressed regret for getting involved with a married woman, emphasizing that it was something he had never done before. Acknowledging the connection they shared, he spoke about Angela's exceptional qualities. While understanding my mention of divorce in the heat of the moment, he cautioned against it in the long term, noting the decades we had invested together and advising against throwing it away. Additionally, he mentioned Angela's initial concerns about the prenuptial agreement, suggesting its vulnerability due to its age and changes in the legal landscape. He dismissed its enforceability, claiming proof of infidelity was lacking. I pondered how my wife had become so misguided as he concluded his legal summation. Turning to Angela, I expressed my inability to understand her choice of seeking legal advice from a corporate attorney who graduated in the bottom quarter of his class from Texas Southern University Law School, a consistently ranked among the top 10 worst law schools in the country. I questioned how she knew that S. White didn't finish, explaining that knowing one's enemy was one of my mottos. Redirecting my attention to Angela, I inquired about her plan moving forward. After taking a few moments to think, she disclosed that she and Michael were spending the weekend together. She detailed their itinerary, mentioning her presence at his apartment that night and a trip to New York City the next day. They planned to stay there Friday and Saturday night, with her returning home on Sunday. Despite being aware of their exact plans, the audacity of my wife's statement deeply saddened me. I expressed my disappointment, hoping she could perceive the profound sadness in my eyes. I pointed out the impact on our quarterly getaway weekend tradition to New York City, filled with memories of spectacular sights and heartwarming experiences such as award-winning Broadway plays, concerts, and sporting events. I conveyed my feelings about the tarnishing of those memories and expressed concern about the change in Angela, comparing her to the person she was involved with. Angela sensed my devastation and responded accordingly, but I was too consumed by the voices in my head urging me to end it. Turning to a very concerned mofo, I questioned him about his wife's reaction to his involvement with mine. Angela urged me to stop, explaining that Michael was a widower and his wife had passed away several years ago. Even mofo displayed some decency, cringing at my wife's last statement. I smirked and addressed Angela, remarking on the contrast between Michael and her. Without pause, I inquired about her being widowed, and Michael hesitantly confirmed it. I reached down and retrieved a manila folder from the backpack next to my chair. After opening it and scanning the first page, I revealed details about Michael's late wife, Dr. Cynthia Browner. She was an emergency department surgeon at Ascension St. John's Hospital in Detroit, with a husband, Michael, and 2 daughters, Katie and Lacey. The document mentioned her resignation and relocation to the Hartford, Connecticut area to join her husband immediately after her children finished school. Despite my dissatisfaction with my marriage, I couldn't help but find the look on Angela's face amusing. Angela confronted me about the revelation, asking if I had lied to her. In response, I couldn't contain my laughter, expressing amusement at the situation of a cheat and a liar accusing each other of dishonesty. Michael intervened by reaching out and cupping Angela's hand. Just before I could protest, anger boiling inside me, I realized something unsettling. I just didn't have the energy to care anymore. Angela's companion, Ong, began apologizing, confessing to his deceit and professing his desire for her. It was sickening to hear. He stood there, holding her hand, making plans for their future together as if I didn't even exist. Angela, after a brief moment of contemplation, took his hand and turned to face me, promising to cut ties with Michael and return to being the loving wife she claimed to be. As they exchanged words, my heart sank further. It was like watching my world crumble before my eyes. Finally, I gathered the strength to speak up. I requested their attention, asking for the chance to lay out my thoughts and feelings, to be heard amidst their betrayal. They exchanged uncertain glances, unsure of how to respond to my request for fairness. I pushed the issue, emphasizing the importance of giving me just 30 minutes of their time. After some reluctance, they finally acquiesced and took their seats. With practiced ease, I set up several Zoom meetings, a skill I had honed during the COVID-19 pandemic. As the TV screen flickered to life, I addressed Peter and Lou, asking if they could hear me. Once the introductions were made, I stunned Angela and her companion by revealing the presence of Lou Baird, my new divorce attorney, and Michael Browner, a corporate attorney. Handing the floor over to the attorneys, Lou wasted no time in laying out the situation. He informed Angela, now addressed as Mrs. Harrington, that he was representing me in our impending divorce, and that papers had already been filed. He gave her a deadline to secure her own legal representation and arranged to be served, warning of the consequences of non-compliance. Lou disclosed that infidelity was cited as the cause for divorce, supported by detailed evidence collected by a private investigator documenting her affair with Mr. Browner. Their shock was palpable as the reality of the situation sank in. As Lou concluded his remarks, I placed a second manila folder onto the coffee table in front of Angie, causing both of them to react with surprise at the loud sound. I informed them that it contained a copy of our divorce petition, along with the private investigator's report. As Asweep reached for the folder, Angie briefly glanced back at the screen. I then stated our intention to insist on the full enforcement of the prenuptial agreement, emphasizing its regular review every 2 years to align with state legal guidelines. With Angie's signed and notarized signature on every update for the past 28 years, I expressed confidence in its enforceability. Next, I conveyed the decision made by the board of directors of Harrington Brokerage the previous night, which relieved Angie of all corporate responsibilities and severed her association with my firm entirely. I outlined the timeline for returning her company car, canceling company credit cards and cell phone, and terminating memberships to various clubs. Additionally, I mentioned the cancellation of joint credit cards and the freezing of joint financial accounts, all in accordance with the prenuptial agreement. We then detailed our request for an 80-20 split of assets in my favor, including the retention of the house free and clear by myself, along with the request for expedited eviction and a 30-day period for Angie to remove her personal belongings from the property. I mentioned the absence of alimony and child support, and noted that there were additional claims which Angie's attorney could explain. Lou concluded by asking if there was anything he had missed, to which I responded that he had covered all the essential points, expressing appreciation for his thoroughness. As the TV screen went black, Angie immediately stood up and exclaimed that they should wait. She turned to me and requested to bring them back as she had questions. I responded by informing her that it doesn't work that way, and she would need to hire her own lawyer to get answers. Angie then expressed her frustration, threatening to destroy me. With a smirk, I turned to her companion and inquired about his legal opinion on the potential impact of this development in the divorce. His lack of response caused Angie to sink back into the couch, visibly distressed. I couldn't help but smile widely as I waved the TV remote at her before pointing it at the TV again. As the second Zoom meeting commenced, I addressed Jake and confirmed if he could hear me. He responded, stating that he had a conference call to attend and needed to keep it brief. He proceeded to inform Browner of his termination, stating that his personal items were being removed from his office and would be left in the lobby, with a 24-hour window for retrieval before disposal. Jake mentioned that there would be no recommendation provided to Angela. I could sense Angela's fear, as her boss's voice slowed down and sighed. Observing her shaking, I realized she was terrified. Despite expressing disappointment in Angela's behavior as a senior member of his staff, Jake acknowledged her 29 years of exemplary service. However, he announced that her position in Hartford had been eliminated and offered her a similar role at their facility in Albany, New York. He gave her a week to decide on the transfer and 30 days to complete the relocation. The screen went blank again, leaving Angie in tears, while her companion slouched back on the couch. I was purposely smirking at Mofo. When he saw me, his rage started to build. He was younger, bigger, and, I'll guess, stronger. Unfortunately for him, he was as stupid as a bag of rocks. As Mofo was ready to explode, I once again waved the remote, pointed it toward the TV, and pressed a button. The screen lit up, and I asked, "Dr. Browner, can you hear me?" Mofo and Angie sat in stunned silence. They were white as ghosts, and their mouths were hanging open. The face of a beautiful blonde filled the screen. Cynthia addressed Michael, informing him that she had filed for divorce and that he should expect to be served in the coming days. She stated her intention to remain in Michigan with their children and mentioned that she had managed to retain her position at the hospital. Michael pleaded with Cynthia, asking her to reconsider and suggesting that they could work things out, insisting that his affair was just a fling. The expression on Cynthia's face, as seen on the screen, indicated her disgust. Cynthia dropped a bombshell, revealing Michael's repeated job losses due to his infidelity. Her additional investigation, following Chris's prompt, painted a damning picture. She listed off the names of Angie's associates, detailing Michael's affairs with each of them. Angie remained silent as Cynthia laughed off any expectation of an answer, declaring Michael unwelcome in her home and requesting his address for his belongings. As the screen faded to black, Michael's threat sent a surge of adrenaline through me. Without hesitation, I retrieved my Colt .45, aiming it squarely at him. The sight of the weapon seemed to physically stagger Michael, but I didn't flinch. I laid down the law, giving him a choice: leave or stay quiet. His silence was the only acceptable response, and thankfully, he chose to comply. Turning back to the screen, I caught sight of Angie's tear-streaked face, her anguish evident. It was a gut-wrenching sight that stirred a mix of empathy and resolve within me. Angie disclosed that she had been seeing a counselor for the past 2 weeks, which prompted her to groan and cry. She expressed frustration, remarking on the irony that despite her actions, she was the one seeking mental health support. I responded with a laugh, acknowledging the absurdity of the situation. Later, I recounted to Angela an insightful question posed by Dr. Waters during our counseling session. She asked whether I understood the saying, "Love is blind," which struck a chord with me. I reflected on how my love for Angie had blinded me to her flaws, even to the point of ignoring her infidelity. Despite everything, I conveyed the depth of my love for her, expressing doubt that she would find anyone else who loved her as intensely as I did. Angie, still visibly upset, explained that she intended to continue seeing Dr. Waters, emphasizing the importance of having someone trustworthy to confide in, especially after such a traumatic experience. She expressed disbelief at the extent of the humiliation and disrespect she endured from someone she loved deeply. However, she remained optimistic, stating her determination to overcome the hurt and move on from the relationship. Angie mentioned discussing her plans for the day with Dr. Waters, who had reservations about seeking revenge, but approved of the first 3 Zoom meetings as a form of payback. However, Dr. Waters advised against the next Zoom meeting, fearing it might set back Angie's personal recovery due to the emotional pain it could cause. I've considered it and will acknowledge that Dr. Wilson is probably correct. The upcoming Zoom meeting is likely to do more damage than good, but I don't care. This meeting will hurt me, but it will cripple you. As I held up the remote for the 4th time and waved it at Angie, she shrunk back into the couch. In a panic, I pointed it at the TV and pushed the button. All eyes were riveted to the screen, and when the face appeared, Angie expressed distress, murmuring in anguish. Chris's daughter, Kelly, then expressed her love for her father, prompting him to reciprocate. Angie cried out, questioning how Chris could treat her so poorly. Kelly interjected, revealing that she had overheard Angie's conversation with her boyfriend and was aware of their actions and plans. She expressed her disappointment and disgust towards her mother, calling her actions grotesque and pitiful. Angie attempted to justify herself, but Kelly remained firm, asserting that Angie's behavior was selfish and self-absorbed. Angela expressed her deep loneliness to Kelly, explaining how much she missed her since she moved away. Kelly, appearing perplexed on the screen, questioned if Angela was blaming her for her own troubles. Angela denied this accusation, insisting it wasn't what she meant. Despite Angela's plea to come to Boston to talk, Kelly rejected the idea, citing Angela's plans to be with her new boyfriend and their private celebration nearer to Cape Cod. Kelly revealed her pregnancy and her intention to celebrate with those who bring love and happiness, not the negativity that has consumed Angela's life. Angela, asserting her maternal authority, demanded an invitation, but Kelly firmly refused, seeking a celebration devoid of the turmoil Angela represents. For the 4th time, the screen went blank while Angela sat, visibly upset. I stood up and discreetly placed my pistol at the back of my pants. I announced that I was going out for dinner and would return in 2 hours. Addressing Angela, I requested her to pack her belongings and essentials, informing her that she wouldn't be allowed back until the court responded to my divorce petition, a process expected to take about a week. Turning to Mofo, I reminded him of my capabilities and gave him 3 days to leave the state, warning of severe consequences if he remained by Monday. As I pulled open the front door, I glanced back at the defeated individuals and mentioned the supposed beauty of the upcoming weekend in New York. Second story. My name is Jim Reynolds, and I'm now 56 years old, standing at 5 feet minus 8 inches, maintaining decent shape. I've been married to Kelly for 22 years, whom I believe to be my life and soul partner. Kelly, 45, with blonde hair, blue eyes, and standing at 5 feet minus 2 inches, is built for lovemaking. I cherished lovemaking moments with her whenever we were alone, although there were times she didn't reciprocate the favor. I spent 8 years in Special Forces right after high school, mastering explosives, followed by 6 years in engineering school. Subsequently, I established my own company, now a multi-million-dollar construction business. Not many know about my military service due to the demons I battled, leading to 4 years of counseling. My pilot's license predates my military service, but Kelly never trusted me enough to join me for rides. I fell in love with Kelly from the first moment, and we married 2 years later. Coming from old money, with her maiden name as Moore, she descended from Richard Moore of the Mayflower. Kelly's family, however, viewed me as a mere servant. Despite this, I spared no expense on her, buying a large house in Cambridge, Massachusetts, complete with a 4-car garage and a BMW. We have 2 kids, or more accurately, she has 2 kids, John, 21, and the 19-year-old, both in college. I bought them each brand new BMWs, and I own a 10-year-old GMC 4-wheel drive pickup. About 6 years ago, they began mistreating me, later revealing they don't consider me family. They don't heed my words and do as they please, only listening to Kelly, their mother. I hired John 8 years ago, thinking he was my best friend, but the kids seemed to adore him. Approximately a year ago, Kelly inadvertently left her email open, and my curiosity led me to read through them all. To my disbelief, she professed to have despised me since we met, a sentiment echoed by her entire family. Shockingly, I discovered the kids aren't mine. They belong to my ex-best friend, John, a truth they've known for about 6 years. Unbeknownst to me, John knew Kelly before I hired him, and the situation amuses them. My son Rick and John, my ex-best friend, find humor in my obliviousness. Upon marrying Kelly, my father-in-law insisted on a prenup, which I signed. It expires in 2.5 years after 25 years of marriage, and includes an infidelity clause stipulating that cheaters leave with nothing. A friend from my military days, Kevin, connected me with Paul, an expert in surveillance. Paul set up a system where Kelly's emails are forwarded to a private account of mine, along with copies of my kids' emails. My entire house is wired to allow me to hear their phone calls, and I have video recordings. Without Kevin's intervention, my family might have faced dire consequences. He dissuaded me from resorting to violence and suggested ways to hurt my family emotionally, such as taking their money, tarnishing their family name, and exposing their disgrace publicly. John and his friends mock me, well aware of the prenup and the affair, eagerly anticipating the arrival of Tom, my best friend, to take over. I possess a video of my father-in-law discussing a plan to create the illusion that I received funding for my company from him. Their scheme involves having John take control of my business, a plan they've been plotting for years. This explains their strategic move to have John apply for a position at my company and act as if he were my closest ally. The only individuals I genuinely trust are my old military buddies, and I'm grateful for maintaining contact with them. I've enlisted Paul as a computer consultant for my company, and he has secured its network, helping me identify allies and foes. This provided me with about 1.5 years to prepare for an impending divorce. During this time, I assumed a role that required me to endure a strained relationship, refraining from expressions of love and engaging in physical closeness only to maintain appearances. Reflecting on how she mistreated me, I intensified these encounters to inflict emotional distress. I made sure to do so only when I was certain she hadn't been involved with John, often sending him out of town for business without her catching on. Although I acknowledge past indiscretions, I pretended ignorance to keep up the appearance that John remained my closest friend. To humiliate her, I engaged in public encounters and discreetly conducted DNA tests that revealed our children weren't biologically mine, but rather John's. Their elaborate plan involved John taking over the company after our divorce, aiming to exploit and embarrass me. Privately, I met with a competitor to sell my company at a reduced price, as I trusted his honesty despite our prior competition. I disclosed my reasons for the sale, ensuring confidentiality among a select few, including our lawyers. The law firm I hired shared my disdain for my father-in-law, a key factor in my decision to engage their services. They provided guidance on establishing a private bank account and phone account. Additionally, they suggested convincing Kelly and the kids to lease cars instead of buying new ones, a proposal well received by everyone involved, ensuring annual upgrades at a lower cost for me. Quietly, I began packing my belongings and placing them in a rented storage shed. People would often laugh either in front of me or behind my back. I suggested to Kelly that we start filing our taxes separately and transfer the house solely into her name for tax purposes. To achieve this, we needed a new mortgage solely in her name, a concept her entire family supported, making it simpler for her to claim the house in the divorce. My new law firm also recommended this to protect my credit. Despite her desire for home improvements, including an in-ground pool, I allowed her to have what she wanted, funded by a second mortgage in her name. Since the house was now solely in her name, the loans also had to be in her name. Half of the funds went towards the changes she wanted, while the other half discreetly found its way into my private account unnoticed. I continued handling all the bills, altering my insurance beneficiaries to direct funds to charities in the event of my demise. I sold my company without attracting attention, ensuring the new owners retained all employees except for John and his associates. Within a year, everything was prepared for my departure. I proposed treating the entire family, including in-laws and my now ex-best friend John, to a 2-week trip to Europe, a move they likely mocked behind my back, yet it served my purpose, especially since Kelly footed the bill. I purchased 150 acres of land in Alaska discreetly, accessible only by plane, utilizing my concealed pilot's license. Plans were made for an off-grid cabin on stilts and a plane shelter, with a hired company to build it, aiming for a move-in ready status. Recognizing the longer timeline for completion, I also bought a house with a large barn-like garage. My residence would be in Fairbanks, a simple house where I could keep a motorhome and have a place to stay when I wanted to travel. A military friend, who shared my dislike for my in-laws, registered a new motorhome in his name. Despite his reluctance, I insisted on compensating him and my other friends for their assistance. From Kelly's emails, they believed I was naive. I ceased payments on the house, their cars, insurances, and utilities, all in Kelly's name. Thus, her credit would suffer, not mine. Establishing a P.O. box in Kelly's name, I had all bills sent there, creating an illusion that I was managing their finances. When the divorce is finalized, her credit will be impacted, and with no alimony payments due to unemployment, they won't uncover the details of my company's sale. All the funds went to an offshore account, creating the appearance that I lost the company to the new owners. Moreover, my plan involves disappearing. Just before the trip, I informed them of a company emergency, stating that I would join them later. Their lack of concern and happiness about my absence didn't go unnoticed. On the night prior to their departure, I made sure Kelly would remember me vividly. Engaging Insinuate, I pushed boundaries for the first and final time, leaving her initially pleased, but ultimately sore and angry. Too bad for John, who had been Insinuate involved with her for years, but had denied me the same experiences. Once they departed for Europe, I returned to the house, leaving it wide open. My friend Paul retrieved surveillance equipment, and I paid a moving van company in cash to transport my belongings to Alaska. I took essentials such as clothes, tools, and fishing gear, along with weapons from my military days, securely stored until my arrival. Leaving all furniture behind, I ensured they wouldn't discover my destination, leaving no paperwork mentioning Alaska. My son Mike, uninterested in hunting or fishing with me, remained unaware of my usual trip destinations. I retained my old phone account to keep Kelly oblivious to my plan, intending to close it out in about a month. Upon departure, I left my old phone with a colleague, instructing him not to answer calls from my wife, but allowing him to make calls for a month. Subsequently, I visited my in-laws' house with my keys, turning on all lights. Utilizing Mike's laptop, I posted on a college website about a week-long college kegger party at their house, anticipating potential chaos. Recognizing their frugality and preference for John, I closed all bank accounts and canceled credit cards from both my wife's and my accounts, totaling $50,000. I sold my truck to a car dealer and after 3 days, departed for Alaska without disclosing my destination. Monitoring events through my wife's emails, no one, including my wife, kids, in-laws, or ex-best friend, made any effort to inquire about my whereabouts. They enjoyed thinking everything was my responsibility, unaware that my wife Kelly was the one funding it all. I took my time enjoying the sights while crossing the country, relying solely on cash for expenses. I drove to Bellingham, Washington, hopped on a ferry to Valdez, Alaska, and then continued to Fairbanks, all without needing a passport. By the time I reached Washington, Kelly and her family had returned from Europe, finding their homes and properties wrecked, completely unaware that I orchestrated it. Surprisingly, they hadn't noticed my absence, being more concerned about their houses than my departure. It was the police, not my so-called family, who started inquiring about me on that Sunday, a day after their return to the United States. Granting my attorney written power of attorney for my divorce, I informed them that I would check in 2 weeks later without revealing my whereabouts. On Monday morning, Kelly received her infidelity divorce papers. Although I wanted to sue John for alienation of affection, Massachusetts law prohibited it due to numerous lawsuits against state politicians. Nevertheless, John and his associates lost their jobs as per my agreement with the new company owners. With all his belongings gone, it was a shame. Kelly found herself owing more than she had in the bank, pursued by creditors, and her cars repossessed. Power and water were cut off. Property taxes and both mortgages were overdue, forcing her and her spoiled kids to move into her parents' hotel since their home was completely trashed. Her parents had to rent cars for the entire family. Feeling empathy for their difficulties, John also had to move in with them, pleading with Kelly's parents for a rental car. They transitioned from BMWs to less impressive vehicles. Kelly and her family hired private investigators to locate me, while Kelly's attorneys attempted to stall the divorce, a futile move. The case gained public attention with DNA test results and explicit videos circulating online. Audio recordings exposed the affair's duration, family involvement, and their plans to ruin and humiliate me publicly, seize my company, and their disdain for the middle class. Videos and audio of her family bribing politicians and public officials and mistreating honest individuals were disseminated on various websites. The divorce eventually concluded. The judge assigned to the case had to recuse himself as he was one of the exposed, paid-off public officials. Though I reached out to the kids, they ignored me. 5 years later, during a visit to Boston to finalize some old business, I went to a restaurant frequented by her family. They walked past me without recognition. Now, sporting long gray hair, a beard, and in better shape, I asked my waiter to send their table a bottle of champagne. The entire family looked 20 years older. They stared at me, and after a few minutes, Kelly yelled, "Oh my God, you son of a Grimalkin!" She recognized me and revealed my identity to them. John attempted to confront me, but with one punch, I knocked him out. When his son approached, I subdued him, but not completely. Kelly ran up, berating me for ruining her family and hurling insults. The police arrived and arrested me. I had the waiter contact my lawyer since I doubted the police would allow me to. They reviewed the surveillance tapes, confirming my calm interaction, and subsequently released me. The footage depicted me sending champagne and calmly conversing with them, highlighting my self-defense stance. Without my lawyer's foresight in preparing for such incidents and securing copies of the surveillance tapes, I believe the police wouldn't have released me, given their connection to my father-in-law. Kelly phoned my hotel room, requesting a conversation. We met in the hotel lobby, ensuring our discussion was recorded. She questioned why I had taken such actions against her and her family. I looked at her in disbelief, calmly revealing that I discovered their plot against me and acted preemptively. I disclosed my awareness of her ongoing affair with John, questioning why she married me if she harbored hatred. I refrained from mentioning the Wired house or spying through her email. They lost their house and cars. Mike lost his house and truck. Forced to live with her parents, Kelly dismissed it as nothing personal, initially escaping her family. She admitted finding pleasure in manipulating me and enjoying the situation involving John. I asked why she didn't divorce me when she met John, and she claimed it was initially enjoyable, ensuring she'd gain everything. I left it at that, returning to my room without further comment. The next day, I departed, heading back to Alaska to relish a peaceful life. I left them to grapple with the ruins I caused in their lives: credit, finances, pride, and reputation, far preferable to resorting to violence. They will have to live with the constant reminder of me.
I always felt connected to the rhythms of rural life. The changing seasons, the smell of freshly tilled soil, and the hum of the tractor were constants for me. But as I got older, I became curious about the world beyond our farm. Stories of distant cities and foreign lands sparked a desire for more than our small town could offer. Our life was simple, rooted in hard work. We weren't struggling, but luxury was a foreign concept. My parents were content, but I dreamed of exploring the world. I knew I needed to make a bold move to break free from the farm. Growing up on a farm taught me that if I wanted more than occasional trips to the local store, I'd have to take drastic action. We weren't destitute, but far from comfortable. By age 7, I was already hauling and stacking hay bales. After high school, despite my parents' wishes, my best friend Hal and I enlisted in the Marines. We spent 4 years stationed in South Korea and Japan. Though we were advised to stick to American-friendly spots, Hal and I explored as much as we could, knowing this might be our only chance to see the world. I spent half my money on fun and sent the rest home. Our service was mostly uneventful, filled with sentry duty and occasional misadventures. By the time we were discharged, everyone called me Army instead of Calvin Bostic, a nickname that stuck when I returned home, though people misunderstood its origin. Back in Belford, job options were limited to farming and construction. I chose construction, working hard all day and still having energy to hang out with friends in the evenings. I met Stacy at Higgins Restaurant, and it was love at first sight. After many attempts, she finally agreed to go out with me, and we got married 9 months later. At 24, Stacy and I were happy, but knew we needed to save money before starting a family. My dad advised me to seek better job opportunities, and he was right. We could barely cover our expenses. After 2 years of marriage, we had little savings and lived paycheck to paycheck. The nearby cities of Somerville and Kensington offered more job opportunities, and we hoped to improve our situation one day. One afternoon, Stacy excitedly shared news about a new gym opening in Kensington with better pay. She was eager to apply and hoped the job would help us save for a family. After a successful interview, Stacy started working at Stokes Fitness Palace. Initially, she dressed conservatively, but over time, her outfits became more revealing, which made me uncomfortable. However, when I visited the gym, I saw that her co-workers dressed similarly, which eased my concerns. Her job seemed to boost her confidence, and her libido increased, leading to wild nights together. She credited her workouts and healthier lifestyle for the change, and I was happy with the new energy in our relationship. One Friday, Stacy mentioned a promotion at the gym and asked me to attend a special event for spouses. Though I was skeptical, I agreed to go. On the night of the event, I felt uneasy, so I brought Hal along. He lent me a spy pen that could record audio just in case. When we arrived at the gym, Hal wasn't allowed in at first, but I insisted, and we both entered after handing over our phones. Inside, Stacy looked nervous, standing next to her supervisor, Gerald Goliath Jenkins. She was dressed in a skimpy bikini, which shocked me. When I asked what was going on, Goliath smugly explained that he had set up an arm wrestling contest, where the winner would get both a cash prize and a night with Stacy. Though she initially resisted, the money tempted her, and she eventually agreed. Goliath revealed his plan to erase my memory with ketamine after I lost, so I wouldn't remember any of it. Stacy would get the money, and we'd continue our lives as if nothing happened. I realized Goliath had made several mistakes, including underestimating the loyalty of his accomplices and assuming I wouldn't notice being pilled. I knew I had to stay calm and think through my next move. One of the goons claimed to know the right dose to knock me out, but I was done playing along. Forget it. I'm not competing. If Stacy's considering this, she's yours. Do whatever you want with her. I'm leaving, I said coldly. Goliath responded, "You can't leave, Army. A deal's a deal. I promised Stacy you'd compete and forget everything. I don't care anymore. I just want a divorce." Stacy started sobbing at my words. Ignoring her, I added, "If you want me to compete, you'll have to liquidate me afterward." Goliath dismissed my threat, saying, "Let's get started." They marched me into the gym, where the men cheered and catcalled at Stacy's nearly undressed body. I looked for Hal, but he was gone. "Where's Hal?" I asked. "He left on his own," one of the guys lied. I knew Hal wouldn't abandon me willingly, so I figured he was nearby. I needed help, fast. Goliath, hiding his muscles under a light jacket, addressed the crowd, keeping their hopes high. "All right, everyone, this is what we've been waiting for. All 40 of us paid our entry fees and signed the waivers. Stokes Fitness Palace isn't responsible for any injuries. It's a double elimination tournament. Lose twice. And you're out," he continued. "Stacy insisted her husband, Army, gets a shot too. He'll face the top contender. If he loses, the winner takes everything. Agreed?" The men nodded. "Great," Goliath said. "The winner gets $20,000, a trophy, and a night with Stacy. You've all seen her video. The winner's in for the night of his life." The crowd cheered as Stacy flirted with them. Goliath added, "We have official referees from the World Arm Wrestling Federation. Their decisions are final." The matches began, with 2 contests at a time. The gym filled with cheers and groans as the men competed fiercely. I sat in the middle, disgusted, watching my wife allow other men to touch her. Anger boiled inside me. After an hour and a half, the field narrowed to 10 finalists. One of the goons snarled, "You just had to open your mouth. After this, I'm going to knock you up and say you fell down the steps." In the semifinals, Goliath easily won, setting up the final match between him and me. He refused to break, confident I was no challenge. I removed my windbreaker, tied it around my waist, and approached the table. The room went quiet. No one believed I had a chance. They already assumed Stacy would be Goliath's prize. I asked, "Where's the $40,000 prize money? I want to see it." Goliath taunted, "Why do you care? You're not going to win." "I still want to see it," I replied. The goons fetched the locked box, and the referees confirmed the money was there. I asked referee Justin Albright to hold on to it and ensure I could leave alive. Goliath smirked. "You'll leave, don't worry." His look told me otherwise. I suspected his goons were waiting outside for me. Satisfied, I said, "I'm only here for the money. I don't care about her anymore. I'm tempted to leave her here, win or lose." Stacy shot me a furious look. "Enough talk. Let's get this over with," Goliath said. Stacy kissed him passionately, fueling my anger. When she tried to kiss me, I stopped her. "Don't touch me, Stacy. You're nothing but a cheating witch. If I had my way, I'd divorce you right now. Get behind me. I can't stand the sight of you." Stacy started crying as the crowd gasped. The referees seemed uneasy, and I hoped they realized I wasn't here by choice. Goliath challenged me. "Put your arm up, and let's see who's the real man." The room erupted in support for Goliath. I reluctantly placed my arm on the table, locking hands with Goliath. Referee Kevin Saunders reviewed the rules, and the match began. I pushed with all my strength, but our hands didn't move. Goliath grinned and slowly forced my hand down, winning the first round as the crowd cheered. Taking a deep breath, I reminded everyone, "Best 2 out of 3, and prepared for the next round." Goliath laughed, confident in his victory. "You don't stand a chance." The room cheered for him, fueling my anger even more. Kevin repeated the instructions, and we started again. Goliath smiled, sure of his victory. I used every ounce of strength and leverage, but after about 10 seconds, Goliath's strength wavered. My arm locked in place, and I pushed back with everything I had. The crowd went silent as I slowly forced his hand down. When the referee called the match in my favor, the room fell into stunned silence. Goliath jumped back in disbelief. "No way! That was a fluke! I'm going to crush you now!" he shouted, tearing off his jacket and ripping his shirt to show off his muscles. He slammed his elbow on the table, ready for the final match. I ignored his theatrics, focusing on my breathing to stay calm. Kevin signaled the start, and Goliath threw all his strength into the first push, nearly pinning me. My hand shook, but I held on, waiting for him to tire. Then Stacy's voice called out, "Come on, Goliath! Finish him so I can have you!" Her words enraged me, giving me a new surge of energy. I pushed back, slowly turning the match in my favor. With one final effort, I slammed Goliath's hand onto the padded mat, and the referee declared my victory. I had defeated him 2 out of 3. The room was stunned. Goliath, in disbelief, asked, "How did you do that?" "I'll explain if you meet 2 conditions," I replied. "First, give me the $40,000. Second, let me leave here undamaged." Goliath agreed, and Justin handed me the money, which I zipped into my windbreaker. I addressed the crowd. "I've won fair and square. Whether you like it or not, I'm not to be touched." Goliath confirmed this, though I suspected his goons were waiting for me outside. I explained, "I've worked on farms and in construction all my life, building strength and endurance. In the Marines, I arm wrestled regularly and never lost. My muscles aren't built for short bursts of strength like Goliath's. They're built for endurance. That's how I knock 'em. Now, I'll take my leave." I retrieved my phone and started toward the door, the crowd still in shock. Stacy called out, offering to drive us home and talk, but I responded, "I'll wait outside. Go put some clothes on." She saw it as a chance to talk, but I intended it as a way to buy time to escape. As I reached the front door, I saw Hal's car. He flashed his lights, confirming he was ready. Just then, 3 of Goliath's goons appeared from behind an SUV and started running toward me. But Marines are trained to run, and I outran them, diving into Hal's car. Hal didn't wait. He peeled out, leaving the scene with tires screeching. I managed to escape with my memories intact. "I didn't abandon you in there, Army," Hal quickly assured me. Some big guys forced me out and tossed my phone on the ground. They said it was a closed event and I wasn't invited, so I waited. I was about to call the police, but since no one else came out, I figured you were okay. But seeing those guys chasing you didn't look friendly. What happened and where do you want to go? He asked. Take me to my place, I said. On the way, I told him everything. Hal was shocked and couldn't believe Stacy's betrayal, especially with the pilling plan. He shook his head in disbelief. What do you want to do? Hal asked as we pulled up to my place. Park behind the building. Stacy will probably show up soon. If she's alone, I'll talk to her while I pack. Can I crash at your place for a few days? Of course. I only have a couch, but it's yours, Hal replied. The couch is fine. If she brings any of those thugs, I'll slip out the back and head to your place. Wait, I have an idea. I took the cash and hid it in an empty fast food bag, which we stashed under Hal's spare tire. I might need backup. Got your weapon? Always, Hal said, showing me his pistol. He tucked it into his waistband and followed me inside. I was nearly done packing when we heard the front door unlock. Hal hid in the closet as Stacy rushed in. Thank God you're here. I was so worried you'd be gone. We need to talk, she said, sounding remorseful. Are you alone, or are the guys you hooked up with earlier nearby? I asked. It's just me, she winced. I'm sorry for what happened tonight. I got caught up in everything. I was supposed to excite the guys and I went too far. I smiled sarcastically. Why bother? They'd already paid. It's not like you'd get more out of them. Stacy tried to justify her actions, claiming she was playing both sides, hoping we'd get the money no matter what. She praised my win and said she was happy to be with me instead of someone else. That's not how I remember it, Stacy. I heard you cheering for Goliath, telling him to finish me off so you could have him, I replied. She looked down but insisted she wanted to build a family with me. This was just a one-time thing for the money. Goliath was sure I wouldn't remember anything. But even if I forgot, you'd still be a cheater, Stacy. You were okay with having me pilled and held against my will. You betrayed me. That's unforgivable. We're done. She started sobbing. No, you don't mean that. We belong together. Suddenly there was a knock at the door. Why don't you see who it is? Stacy suggested sweetly. I don't care who it is, I said, suspecting it was the thugs. Stacy grabbed my phone and left the room. As soon as she opened the door, she let in Goliath and the 5 goons. I have his phone so he's not recording anything, she said. Little did she know I had already activated the recording device. She continued, just hold him down, get the pills into him, and make it look like a mugging. What is this? Get out of my house, I shouted. I'm sorry, honey, but I can't let you remember tonight. It'll be easier if you just drink the stuff and go to sleep. If not, they'll force it down your throat and rough you up, she admitted. You didn't plan on this, I said, as I pulled out my Glock 17. Now sit down. I don't want to shoot anyone, but if I have to, I'll strike 3 of you before the rest decide what to do. They froze, clearly not expecting me to be armed. Goliath sneered. You wouldn't shoot. We'd still get you. Want to bet? I replied calmly. I'm a Marine, trained to shoot. If anyone makes a move, I'll put a bullet in 3 of you. Now sit down. One of the goons hesitated, but finally said, Why should we? We still have a chance. You have no chance, I replied. If you want to talk, sit. Otherwise, I'll call the police. It's your choice. They sat down as I instructed, sliding back on the sofa and chairs to make it harder for them to get up. I positioned myself against the opposite wall, sitting in a kitchen chair with my pistol resting on my thigh. My finger hovered just outside the trigger guard, ready to act. Look, sweetheart, Stacy said. Just give them the $20,000 and take the ketamine. Tomorrow, we'll wake up $20,000 richer, like nothing happened. I asked how she'd explain the money to me. Simple, she replied. You won $40,000 and gave me $20,000 to hold. Then you got mugged on the way home. They might have to rough you up a bit to make it look real, but you'd wake up as my loving husband, and we'd have a bright future. I started laughing, which made the men uneasy. Stacy looked puzzled and began to stand. Grab his weapon, Goliath urged. He won't hurt you. He loves you. He's half right, I said. I used to love you, but if you stand up, I'll shoot 3 of these guys. She sat back down, shocked. You're so stupid, Stacy. You fell for Goliath's lie that I'd wake up with no memory and believe whatever story you told me. But you were never going to see a dime of that money. They planned to pill me and have their way with you. They'd record everything and use it to blackmail you into doing whatever they wanted. This was never a one-time deal. Stacy tried to deny it, saying the guys were happy with what they got earlier, but I pointed out the video she made, which could easily spread and ruin her reputation. Now, whose idea was it to invite me tonight? I asked. Stacy admitted it was Goliath's idea. He wanted to humiliate me, not just by screwing her, but by making me watch. He wanted control, to keep me from interfering and calling the police. And once they had their blackmail material, they'd own her. You were never going to get that money, Stacy. They'd make sure of it, they'd use you whenever they wanted, and you'd be stuck. Stacy finally began to realize she'd been duped. She admitted to agreeing to sleep with Goliath, but not the others. I laughed at her naivety. You really think they'd go to all this trouble and not take turns? They'd get what they wanted, and you'd end up with nothing but a blackmail video. And even if you got the money, they'd make sure you paid for it. At the gym, they'd stage my injuries to look like an accident. But here at home, they'd make it look like a real mugging. They'd knock me senseless, maybe even break some bones. You wouldn't have the money to cover the medical bills because you were never going to get it. And if you did, Goliath would just use that as leverage to control you further. And let's be real, Stacy. You'd never go off birth control because you'd be too scared of getting pregnant with one of their kids, not mine. She sat there, finally understanding the mess she was in. I had figured it all out and made it clear I was done with her and her lies. Stacy stared at me in shock. Let me point out another flaw in your plan, I said. You wanted to say I got mugged after giving you $20,000, but there are 42 witnesses, including the referees, who saw me leave with all the cash. No mugger would have left any of it behind. Your story wouldn't hold up. They'd take every cent. How'd an uneducated jarhead outsmart us? Goliath grumbled. Stacy looked horrified, realizing how badly she'd been played. Just because I don't have a degree doesn't mean I'm stupid, I replied. In the Marines, I was trained to think through situations. Earlier tonight, I knew those 5 guys were over liquidation. You claiming to control them because they couldn't take you is ridiculous. You can't control what they do on their own. I bet you're all buddies, but this wasn't just about money. The split would be small, so why risk everything? No, the reward had to be worth it. I'm guessing you told your buddies about Stacy, and they helped you with this plan. Suddenly, Goliath grabbed Stacy and pulled her in front of him. Drop the weapon or I'll snap her neck, he threatened. I'm not going to shoot you, Goliath, but I will shoot 3 of these guys if you hurt her. Eliminating her just gives me more reason to act, I said, raising my Glock. Now, let her go. One of the goons spoke up. Jerry, let her go. This guy isn't bluffing. He'll shoot us. Goliath hesitated, then released Stacy. The goon continued. Look, you're not going to shoot anyone. You don't want prison, and you're not going to call the cops either. Why wouldn't I? I asked. He explained. We've got 42 witnesses who saw your wife acting like a witch. They think you were in on it, pimping her out. You can deny it, but it'll look like you just got jealous. We might have threatened to rough you up, but liquidation? No way. That's how it'll play out. You can't prove otherwise. Goliath let go of Stacy, who looked at him with a mix of fear and anger. The goon continued. We'd be caught with ketamine and a video camera, sure, but we're vets. We have a plausible reason for everything. Stacy won't report us because she's got no proof. Meanwhile, everyone saw her behavior tonight. She made that video, and you might not want that coming out in a small town. Goliath growled, I need that money. I just bought a new truck. The smarter goon cut in. Forget it. You lost the contest. Splitting the remaining money 5 ways isn't worth the risk. Stacy was the real prize, and we planned to keep her for ourselves. We weren't going to turn her into a promiscuous immediately. We had more events planned with her as the prize. Eventually, we might let her have a kid, but only after she was thoroughly ours. We'd even give her some money back to keep her happy. But now it's over. We're leaving. The man next to the leader spoke up. We'll leave, and you two can sort things out. But honestly, I doubt counseling will help. You'll never truly forget or forgive. Still, I have a suggestion. I can give you some ketamine, a good dose that, with a few drinks, should erase your memory. We planned on giving you about 6 shots of booze. If you love Stacy, you could take it after we're gone. She won't be working at the gym anymore, so she's safe from us. Hopefully, she's learned her lesson about being gullible and the risks of cheating. I was amused by how quickly they were trying to salvage their plan. You think I'd actually do that? I asked. The man continued. It'd be like giving her a second chance. She could explain the money truthfully. You won it in an arm wrestling contest. Most competitors don't live locally, so it's unlikely you'd ever run into one again. If you did, they might mention your hot wife, but probably not her behavior. I pretended to consider his point, but questioned how she'd explain my memory loss. That's tricky, he admitted. She'd have to make it look like you fell and strike your head after drinking. You might decide to get checked out at a hospital, so you'd need a solid story. But you'd still be married, and love can make you trust her explanation. The men chuckled at that, clearly trying to convince me. I suspected they were already thinking of ways to come back for the money. I let him continue. You'd have to take the ketamine tonight, though, to ensure it erases enough memory. You might remember going to the gym, but not what happened there. That gives Stacy the chance to fill in the blanks. I then raised the real issue. What to do about Stacy? I could just divorce her and move on. That seems like the smartest choice, I mused aloud. Stacy began begging, promising she'd never do anything like this again. But you still cheated, I replied. And taking ketamine after you guys leave raises another problem. What if you come back and blackmail Stacy for the money? You could create doubt and tear us apart. The men all shook their heads, including Stacy. I demanded each of them verbally promise they wouldn't bother us again, which they did, piling on assurances as if I was about to let them go. The big problem is, Stacy would have to hurt me enough to cover the amnesia, I continued. She'd need to make it look like a real fall. Could you do that, Stacy? Oh yes, I'd make it convincing, she said eagerly. A few kicks to the head and ribs, maybe even stage a mugging. We could say we went out to celebrate and you got jumped. I could claim I ran for help and when I came back they were gone. I'd bring you home and kick you here to make it look real. I'd use your heavy boots and leave some bruises, maybe kick you in the balls a few times. Just enough to hurt, but not do serious damage. I couldn't believe how quickly she got on board with hurting me. The 6 men stared at her in disbelief. And tomorrow I'd take care of you, bringing you ice packs for your head and balls, she added, almost gushing. We'd save our marriage, have money for a baby, and I promise I won't cheat again. That includes making out or letting anyone feel me up. I noticed she only said that because I called it cheating. She still didn't fully agree. I asked her calmly, You really wanted to have sex with Goliath, didn't you? You'd be thinking of that when you kicked me. Okay, I won't lie, she admitted. Yes, I was excited about screwing him. I felt his excitement and wanted it. It would have been wild. But now I'm mad at both of you. You for figuring it out and him for planning it. I'd like to kick you both in the nuts. Maybe that could be a condition for letting them go. I get to kick Goliath a couple of times too. Goliath bristled. Screw that, I'm being honest here. You won't remember this anyway, and you won't remember the other stuff either. Stacy's flushed face showed she'd remember everything and enjoy the memory, even if she missed out on actually being with Goliath. She seemed eager to hurt me, just as she had been ready to break my heart earlier, as long as I wouldn't remember any of it. Since we're being honest, I have a few more questions before deciding whether to let you go or let Stacy erase my memory, I said. Both Stacy and Goliath nodded eagerly. You both claimed you never actually slept together and were candid because you thought you'd erase my memory. Stacy even asked that I get a chance to win the prize, though she didn't think I'd succeed. But tell me, did you plan to make me watch before pilling me? You've hinted at it both ways. I already suspected the truth and confirmed it when they responded. Yeah, we thought it'd be thrilling to make you watch, Goliath admitted. Stacy liked the idea of having that kind of power over you. The word power stood out, especially considering how much Stacy seemed to relish the thought of hurting me after I passed out, or maybe even while I was still conscious, just to hear me scream. It wasn't just me, Stacy protested, still not realizing what she was saying. Goliath said it'd be hot if you cried while watching him be a better man. I then asked who suggested it first. Goliath quickly replied, I did, but Stacy added ideas to make it wilder. I followed up with another question. You said she gave you all heads this afternoon as payment for your help. Is that true? One of the men confirmed it. Yeah, she agreed to it to show she was on board and to pay us since we couldn't compete for her. I nodded, hiding my emotions. By then, I just wanted answers. All 5 men admitted she'd done it, each providing details. Stacy then said, Let's let them go and take care of your memory. We can reset our marriage, and I promise I won't be tempted again. I barely kept a straight face. Yeah, after you enjoy stomping my nuts, I said sarcastically. Oh no, I won't enjoy it. I'll just do enough to make it look real, she contradicted herself. I asked the men if they planned to double back for the money, and Stacy after I was out, and they all denied it, trying to convince me. I pulled out a second cell phone, raising my Glock to remind them I was serious. These guys aren't going anywhere far. They'll give us just enough time for me to take the ketamine and maybe stage the mugging. Then they'd come back for the money and you, Stacy. Stacy looked shocked. You'd be dumb enough to tell them I'd taken the pill and they'd return to finish the job, I said. She asked what their plan was. They already have enough blackmail material on you. Do you really think they didn't record everything? They'd come back, take the money, and force you into their plan again? I could have pretended to take the ketamine, waited for them to return, and caught them red-handed. But that would have been risky. Goliath ranted about how a dumb Marine outsmarted them. I asked where the video was, and the veterinarian admitted it was in his case by the door. Stacy retrieved the camera and tossed me the SD card, but I confirmed the footage was also saved on the camera's hard drive. I told them I didn't care about the video and let Stacy decide what to do with it. If you let them blackmail you, that's on you, I said. I had bigger concerns, like the recording I had been making since the beginning. Just then, the emergency operator's voice came through. What is the nature of your emergency? I gave my name and address to the emergency operator and reported, I have 6 men my wife invited to our home to attack and rob me. I'm holding them at under pressure and need officers dispatched. No ambulance is needed yet, but it might be if one of them tries anything. All 6 men glared at me. What the hell? We were ready to leave. You even talked about fixing things with your wife. We gave you the camera. You could have deleted all the evidence. We'd have no blackmail material left, the veterinarian protested. Stacy looked shocked. Well, my marriage is ruined because of you guys, so I'm returning the favor. Now you can explain to your wives why you got arrested and see if they believe you. I doubt they're as gullible as mine. 3 of the men shifted in their seats. I raised the Glock, making sure they saw my finger on the trigger. I wouldn't try it. This trigger is sensitive and takes less than 2 pounds of pressure to fire. And Stacy, I told you I'd never trust you again. You seemed too eager to fake a mugging by stomping my nuts. I called out for Hal, who stepped out from around the corner. This is his phone, I said, holding up the phone I used to keep the emergency call active. Everything's been recorded and the pin recorder is back up. One of the men yelled, "That's hearsay." I shrugged. It'll still be part of the statement, and whether it's allowed in court or not, your wives might not like what they hear. I kept the weapon moving between them, knowing they were close to making a move. Hal, go outside and inform the police. I'll put the weapon down when they enter. When the officers arrive, they'll take us all in. You weren't involved, so secure everything for me, okay? I said, handing him the SD card from the camera. Got it, Hal replied. I'll come down to the station after locking up. We heard sirens as police cars approached. The emergency operator confirmed. Officers are on location. I instructed, my friend is at the door, and it's unlocked. I'm sitting in the room with the pistol held by the barrel. The first officer through the door was Hal's older brother, Bob, a police lieutenant. What's going on here? Army, put the weapon down and step away. I complied, noting his body cam was running. Well, it seems my wife cheated on me, gave these guys heads earlier, and planned to sleep with this one, I said, pointing at Goliath. They threatened to pill me with ketamine and booze. When that plan failed, they came here for a second chance. My wife let them in and gave them my phone so I couldn't record anything. It's in his shirt pocket, I added, nodding at Goliath. That phone should show their intentions. Goliath quickly countered. Ridiculous. We drove Stacy here after her husband left her in Kensington following his arm wrestling win. She invited us to celebrate. He's delusional. He told contestants he feared for his life. I suggested taking us all to the station to give statements and make a public record. Bob cut me off, saying he knew what to do. Soon, everyone but Hal was in handcuffs and loaded into police cars. Hal told Bob he'd secure the house and then come to the station. I knew he'd upload copies of the recordings as planned. At the station, I explained what happened and what I suspected their plan was. I advised Bob to check the case left at my house for ketamine and the camera with the video of Stacy. Bob offered me coffee and then began taking the other statements. Later, Bob returned. Army, these guys are all telling the same story, that you're crazy. They claim you won the arm wrestling competition and then held them at under pressure after Stacy invited them over. One of them is a lawyer and wants to represent the others, but since he's also a suspect, he can't. They're all writing statements. Do you have any proof? I can't open the files on that camera without a warrant, but I did impound it. I told Bob that Hal had an audio recording of their confessions and was making copies. This changed everything immediately. As soon as Stacy heard about the recording, She broke down and changed her story, claiming she was seduced and blackmailed into cheating by the guys. An officer accompanied Hal and me back to my house with my permission, so no warrant was needed. They secured a small case one of the men had left at the door. Inside, along with the camera Stacy had removed earlier, were 2 bottles of liquor, ketamine, large tubes of lubricant, and some flexible hoses. The video downloaded from the camera clearly showed my soon-to-be ex-wife happily engaging with all 5 men in Goliath, talking about how much she loved the thrill and how she couldn't wait to be with Goliath after he won the contest. Bob might have pushed the limits, but he let me watch the video at the station. By then, I had my own copy to watch later. With enough evidence, Stacy, Goliath, and the 5 men were kept in jail until their arraignment on Monday. I kept the SD card hidden. Bob told Hal and me to stick around, but I decided to leave town. Early Sunday morning, I bought 2 cheap round-trip tickets to Las Vegas for Hal and me. We spent the day collecting discarded sports betting slips, amassing nearly $40,000 worth, planning to claim I'd lost most of the money. Hal and I had a wild time in Vegas, taking photos at strip clubs and posing with liquor bottles to create a story about spending our winnings on a good time. We even made donations to a children's cancer hospital, wearing the sweatshirts they gave us for our contributions. On Monday, I ignored a barrage of calls, suspecting some were from Stacy's parents. Bob eventually texted, demanding I call him back. When I did, he wasn't pleased, but told us to get back home. When we returned, Bob gave us an official reprimand as he took us to the district attorney's office. We claimed we didn't realize we had to stay in town and thought close meant anywhere in the continental U.S. Bob and the DA weren't happy with our explanation. The DA asked me to go over the events again. My story matched the audio recording perfectly, and I was more determined than ever to divorce Stacy. I visited a lawyer, Mr. Price, who advised me that the divorce would cost around $2,000 but was the least of my worries. He told me not to stress about hiding the money since I didn't have much left, and that the criminal charges against Stacy and the men were more important. On Tuesday, I found a new apartment close to work. Though my parents would have taken me in, I preferred to stay independent and away from Stacy. By then, rumors had spread in our small town. The story was that Stacy had an affair with her boss, who came to my house to confront me, and I held him at under pressure until the police arrived. After Stacy refused to move back in with her parents, I moved out. Following my lawyer's advice, I kept the true story quiet, holding onto the audio recordings as leverage. On Wednesday, I started receiving more calls from unknown numbers. The 4th was from Gloria Jenkins, Goliath's wife, who texted, asking me to call her. Curious, I did. She picked up immediately and told me her husband claimed everything was a misunderstanding. She wanted to meet in person, so I drove to Kensington, bringing Hal's recording pin just in case. At the cafe, Gloria introduced herself. She was a stunning woman, blonde and in her late 20s. Despite her calm exterior, I could sense her anxiety. I wasn't sure if she was a sufferer or in on the scheme with her husband, so I stayed cautious. She explained that all she knew was her husband and his friends had been arrested after an incident at my home, and she suspected she wasn't getting the full story. She asked me to explain what had happened. Realizing she and the other wives deserved to know the truth, I suggested inviting them over. I pointed out the 3 women sitting across the cafe who had been watching us since I arrived. Gloria seemed impressed by my observation and invited the women over. After introductions, one of them nervously asked, "Is it as bad as we imagined?" I replied, "Maybe not for you, but for me. It's the end of my marriage." Goliath had been trying to seduce my wife for a while. He succeeded in everything but actual sex, and he and his friends planned to blackmail her into being available to them in the future. I watched their expression shift from disbelief to anger and back to shock, with muttered curses all around. "No wonder the cops held them so long," Gloria said. "They got out this morning and have been with their lawyer since. I assume you have proof, even though the guys claim you don't." I pulled out a flash drive. "I have hours of audio recordings, pretty damning stuff. There's some irrelevant chatter in the middle, but I can summarize it and then you can listen." One of the women shook her head in disbelief. "I can't believe how dumb your wife is. A head isn't cheating? Seriously? And to make a video of herself knowing it would be sent to strangers?" Another added. "She thought it was okay to cheat as long as you didn't remember because of the pills?" Someone muttered. I nodded, noticing how the women weren't shocked by their husband's behavior. "Why would I be?" one woman said. "My husband's an egotistical idiot. My mom warned me he'd cheat eventually. When we heard about an angry husband with a weapon, we figured it was something like this." but this is worse than we imagined. Gloria suggested, "Let's go to my office. We can listen to the recording there." She explained she worked in investments and had a nearby office. They listened to the recording, fast-forwarding through the arm wrestling competition. By the end, they were almost as angry as I was. One woman joked, "Teach me how to bite it off if he tries that crap again." The others laughed, and they all made quick phone calls, none lasting more than a minute. Gloria explained that the 6 men had been tight-knit friends since high school, bonding over bodybuilding. They chased girls but were disciplined, charming, and stuck together more than with their wives. "We girls get along because of them, but our marriages aren't great. We're like satellites around their bromance." Later, when the others had left, Gloria asked me, "Army, you're clearly smart. Why are you working such a low-income job?" I shrugged and explained, "After I left the military, I wanted to stay close to my parents." "Do they need constant help?" she asked. I shook my head. "No, they actually told me I didn't need to stay so close, but I got complacent. It was home. Hal's in a similar situation. His brother's a senior police officer, but he works a low-stress job too." I continued, "While overseas, I read a lot, mystery stories mostly. It kept my mind sharp." Gloria laughed, and I found myself liking her laugh more than I should have. I quickly excused myself, feeling guilty. "You can call me anytime," I told her, though I wasn't sure I should admit how much I looked forward to it. After several calls, texts, and voicemails, Stacy finally tracked me down, pleading to talk. "All right, Stacy, what makes you think there's a misunderstanding? And why do you think there's any chance of saving our marriage?" She looked startled. "You made it clear on Saturday night. You didn't think what you did was wrong. Flirting, making out, letting another man touch you wasn't cheating? Even what you did with those men wasn't cheating as long as I didn't know." Stacy babbled, "I didn't mean to hurt you. I just got caught up in the excitement with Goliath." "So the next time a hot guy comes along, you might get caught up again?" I asked sarcastically. "And you thought it was okay to humiliate me, wipe my memory, and then everything would be fine?" I surprised myself by staying calm. I wasn't angry, just indignant. Stacy ran through her excuses and finally admitted, "I was wrong, but I want you, Army. I want to have your babies. It was just fun, and I didn't think you'd ever know." "But you would know," I pointed out. "You'd remember and think you got away with it." She suggested counseling, but I wasn't convinced. "Do you want to listen to a recording of what you said Saturday night? If you still think it was acceptable, then we can talk." I had no intention of fixing our marriage, but I wanted her to confront the reality of her actions. The following Saturday, Gloria invited me to a dinner party with the other wives and girlfriends. I wanted to see Gloria, but wasn't entirely trusting, so I carried a small pistol. "I'm glad you came, Army," Gloria said warmly. "I was hoping you'd trust me, but I understand being cautious. You're smart to be prepared." The women discussed their husbands' weak excuses. None of them seemed that upset about the divorces. One said, "They're more worried about money. We're going after half of everything and won't pay a cent for their legal defense." "My husband downplayed the charges," another added. "But when I quoted the recordings, he panicked. He didn't realize you recorded the whole night." I nodded. "Exposing them was my main goal." Gloria giggled. Jerry's reaction was priceless. "How did a jarhead think to record everything?" One woman added, "It saved me from marrying Andy. I need to look beyond the surface next time." They raised their glasses, cheering in agreement. Gloria seemed to be studying me closely. One of the women asked if I'd talked to Stacy. I admitted I had, curious about her excuses. They guessed I'd recorded it and laughed, saying they'd done the same with their husbands. "Damn, your wife is delusional," one commented after hearing the recording. "She doesn't think what she did was that wrong. She's just mad you found out." Gloria added thoughtfully, "She admits her faults, but still wants a future with you." "If that's love, I'd hate to see her version of hate," another woman quipped. Gloria replied, "She loves him, but doesn't understand that love alone can't fix a marriage. There's so much more needed." She looked at me intently, leaving her statement hanging in the air. I waited until midweek to call Gloria, curious to see how she was doing. I was surprised when she seemed genuinely happy to hear from me, and we decided to meet up that weekend. "I'm really glad you called, Army," she said when we met. "I wanted to call you, but hesitated." That surprised me. "I hope you trust me this time," Gloria added with a grin, then joked, "Maybe I should frisk you, and not just your waistband." I stared at her, caught off guard. "We're not kids," she continued. "I think we both feel a connection." Of course, we met under the worst circumstances. You're probably wondering what kind of shallow person I am to have fallen for a guy like Jerry. I started to protest, but she kept going. I was in love with the idea of love. Jerry was smart, good-looking, and had the kind of physique that made people admire him. It fed my ego to be the one who won him. My mom warned me he'd break my heart, but I didn't listen. By the time I realized she was right, I was already married. "But I'm not a quitter," she added sheepishly. "Though this is one time I should have quit. I can see why your wife fell for his charm. He could sell anything. He was great at coaching, always encouraging people. I'd never seen him try to seduce another woman, and I'm not sure he ever cheated on me, though he denies it." My mom wasn't surprised by what happened. She said it was just a matter of time before Jerry stepped out on me. At least we didn't have kids. "I'm not sure what Jerry saw in me either," Gloria admitted, blushing. To me, it was obvious. She was smart, compassionate, and incredibly attractive. I'm pushy, maybe too driven. I was raised to always do my best and expect the same from others. My parents didn't have high incomes, but they loved their jobs and raised two well-rounded daughters. They encouraged us to try everything: dance, sports, music, so we could find what we liked. Dad didn't say much when I told him about Jerry. Mom spoke for both of them when we discussed it. She even had a few things to say about you. Me? I was surprised. I've never met her. True, but you're part of the story, Gloria said. Curious, I asked, what did she say? Most of it's between us, but she analyzed you and your wife like I did. And, I prompted, she agrees with me. Stacy loves you, but doesn't respect you. I nodded. Yeah, I've wondered if she even loved me at all. Oh, she loves you. She wants your kids. If she just wanted to cheat, she wouldn't have cared if you found out. She went to great lengths to keep your marriage intact. But part of her thinks you're not good enough for her. She wants the upper hand. That's why she talked about humiliating you after sleeping with Jerry. That's a whole new level of disrespect, and it pisses me off. I laughed. It didn't exactly make me happy either. Gloria's eyes filled with tears. You don't get it. It infuriates me. I want to rip her hair out for what she planned to do to you. She might not respect you, but I do. Taking a deep breath, she continued. From the first moment we met, I respected you. You had the guts to meet Jerry's wife, and you treated me with kindness and respect. I liked that. I liked you. Let me finish, Gloria said, holding up her hand. You remind me of my dad. They say girls marry men like their fathers. I didn't with Jerry, but I see some of Dad in you. Mom even warned me not to fall for you too quickly, but I'm struggling here. I have to know. Do you like me? I admitted. I felt guilty about my feelings for you. Part of me wanted to be with you just to get back at Jerry, but I realized I don't care about him. I care about you. And that scared me. I'm married, even if it's to someone who doesn't deserve me. But yes, I like you, Gloria, she smiled. Good. Then we can take our time and see how we fit together. We both laughed, and then she asked, Can we at least kiss? I nodded, and she quickly sat in my lap, kissing me deeply. When we pulled apart, she grinned. I'm staking my claim on you. And when the gold runs out, you'll move on? I teased. She giggled. No, I'll reinvest everything I find. I want a relationship built on love, not just lust. Respect is key. We'll find common ground because I'm a pushy woman who knows what she wants, just like my mom. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about what Gloria had said. I knew I was rebounding from Stacy, but this felt different. Gloria was right. Stacy might have loved me, but she didn't respect me. That stung. Gloria, on the other hand, openly respected me, even comparing me to her father, whom I hadn't met yet. She was clear about her growing feelings, and while I was deeply attracted to her, it scared me and made me feel guilty. Meanwhile, Mr. Price filed my divorce papers, separating my finances from Stacy's. Without a job, she relied on our meager savings and eventually had to call her parents for help. This meant confessing our separation and its cause, though she conveniently left out the worst parts. Her father called, upset, urging me to consider counseling since, in his version of events, Stacy had merely flirted and gone too far with her boss. I sent him a flash drive with the audio recording of that night. 3 days later, he apologized, admitting he understood but still needed to help his daughter stay out of jail. By the end of the second week, everyone involved knew I had the full audio recordings. The 2 veterinarians were sanctioned, unable to handle anesthetics, which made their work nearly impossible. At the gym, every female member was informed about Jerry's actions, and Stokes Fitness fired him to avoid a mass walkout. I couldn't sue the company, but my attorney had considered it. The criminal trial took 6 months, which I learned was relatively quick. The local media followed the case closely, given the prominence of the men involved. Lawyers tried to suppress the audio recordings, the prosecution's key evidence, and the men even tried to press charges against me for holding them at under pressure. That was quickly dismissed. Stacy, feeling betrayed, turned on them and testified for the prosecution, revealing how they planned their attack on me. Her confession of agreeing to pill me earned her a 2-year sentence, with 18 months suspended. While I initially would have been satisfied just to ruin their relationships, I couldn't deny a sense of justice being served. During this time, I grew closer to Gloria. She was a tough taskmaster, pushing me to enroll in college. Hal joined me, and we both did well. By the time the trial came, we had completed a semester with good grades. Gloria also set Hal up with Marie, one of the exes of the Goons. Both women were remarkable, and Hal joked about their shared fates. Gloria and I waited until our divorces were final before taking our relationship further, and it was worth the wait. On our honeymoon, Gloria revealed she had stopped her birth control months earlier, wanting to start a family with me. She also had a temporary tattoo on her back that read, "Exclusive property of Calvin Bostic," which made me laugh. We both felt lucky to have found each other. One day, while out for a snack, we ran into Stacy, who was back at her old job after serving her time. She tried to make small talk, but I informed her that Gloria was now my wife and that we were expecting a child. Another server took over for Stacy, who seemed upset. Over the next few months, Gloria and I settled into a new rhythm. My divorce from Stacy, though difficult, felt necessary for my happiness. Gloria and I focused on our future together, excited about the arrival of our baby. The criminal trial concluded and justice was served, giving me closure. When our son was born, our lives were filled with joy. Gloria and I continued to grow closer, grateful for the second chance at happiness. Looking back, I realized that the difficult journey had led me to where I was meant to be, by Gloria's side, with our son in my arms, finally feeling at home.
Hello. Lately, I've been meeting someone truly warm-hearted. Where else could you find such a comforting person? I'm well aware that, as a married man, this isn't right. But I can't bear the thought of losing such a precious woman, and am struggling with how to control my feelings. I'm a father of 2. I grew up as the youngest of 3 siblings in a family considered blessed at the time. Both of my parents graduated from 4-year colleges and were prominent business figures in our community. My mother supported my father's business while raising us, ensuring we lived comfortably. We always had better school supplies and clothes compared to other kids. Due to the thriving family business, we had a housekeeper living with us since my mother couldn't manage the household work and take care of 3 children on her own. I ended up attending the most prestigious university in our area, where I met my wife through a student club and started dating. After landing my first job, we got married. She was my first love. I lived my life knowing only her until I made a significant mistake. Shamefully, I had an affair with another businessperson I met at a gathering. We had a son first, then a daughter, and I worked hard to raise them. I was doing well in my job, earning a decent income, and my children were growing up healthy, which made me greedy. We moved to a renowned school district, and my wife began homeschooling our children using her major. I was successful in my company, receiving raises and doing well at work. However, large corporations have an abundance of talent. Suddenly, I was faced with a notice suggesting voluntary resignation. I was at an age far from considering retirement as my last job. Around this time, a distant relative of my wife, who worked as a public servant, gave us a tip about a government project that would be a hit but required a certification. We were advised to study online and get certified. Life is unpredictable, so my wife and I both got our certifications. Then, I applied for voluntary retirement and received 3 years' worth of salary plus severance pay, which was enough to live on. For the first time, I received a business registration certificate. Although the business, being government-run, wasn't hugely profitable, it freed me from the daily overtime, competition, and exams, which was a significant advantage. Becoming a boss for the first time, I realized how much I didn't know, but by attending meetings with peers in the same industry, I started to exchange information and learn. Working together frequently meant we found ourselves on the phone several times a day discussing work. Since our offices were close by, face-to-face meetings to tackle work tasks became common. The groundwork of our friendship was laid when Sophia, who had recently started her own business, asked me for advice. I provided her with some guidance, and she was able to resolve her issue successfully. She expressed her gratitude by offering to buy me dinner, mentioning how she had been struggling alone, with no one to turn to for advice since her business was still in its infancy. My wife has always understood that my job couldn't be done alone. Despite holding a certification, she had never worked in the field herself, but I kept her updated on every detail, so she was understanding whenever I went out for drinks with other business owners in the evenings. One day, I suddenly had dinner plans and met up with Sophia. She shared how taxing and uncertain the business felt, even though it required minimal capital being a government project. I encouraged her, saying that persistence and sharing information would eventually bring good fortune. I'm not much of a drinker, but I enjoy good conversation. Sophia confided in me that her husband had been unemployed for a year, which was tough because they had growing kids and expenses were piling up. She had started the business out of necessity, but felt let down because her husband wasn't contributing to household chores or childcare. He was once hardworking, but had become disillusioned after losing his job. She lamented about the struggle of managing work, household chores, and taking care of the family's needs all by herself. Yet she tried to keep a calm front for her sensitive children. I empathized with Sophia, discussing the pressures of being a provider. Her husband was likely struggling with the lack of job opportunities and becoming increasingly irritable. I reassured her, understanding her husband's perspective, and acknowledged her diligence at work. Sometimes a meal and a conversation are all it takes to alleviate stress, I told her. As the alcohol flowed, Sophia opened up even more. She mentioned how, despite any marital issues, sleeping in the same bed could bring reconciliation, but they had been sleeping separately. My wife, busy with tutoring and consulting with other parents, barely had time before she was off to sleep in our shared space. Sophia and I realized what we needed from each other in that moment of urgency, leading to a visit to my office to address what was lacking. Since then, Sophia and I have maintained a comfortable relationship. I've heard that workplaces can often be the starting point for affairs. Sophia has become like an office wife to me, a first in my life. We both understand the importance of protecting our respective families. Yet the affection remains unchanged. Sophia is 5 years my senior and occasionally calls me brother, which I know shouldn't happen, but I find it hard to resist her charm and wonder how to manage these feelings.